Tonight on the Speakeasy, we discuss the game taking journalism by storm, Pin the Blame on the Tragedy. It's a game anyone can play, no matter your mental age or emotional intelligence. Take a sensitive and complex issue and then apply to it the prejudice that you held long before you knew a single detail about the current crisis. The game involves 2 decks of cards, well shuffled. You pick up the top card from the tragedy deck, for instance, asteroid falling to Earth, and then you go to the blame deck, and hey presto, Brexit is the cause. Genius, see? And listen, the link between these 2 things, that is not what's important. The grunts of tribal approval from your support base, that is everything. It's a game, so get playful. And hey, if you can't link asteroids to Brexit, should you even be a journalist? Let's try another example. Australian bushfires? What's the cause? Donald Trump. Actually, should this still be in the deck? I know we've got a lot of use out of it, but okay, one more election cycle. We're still ironing out some of the glitches, but maybe you can play at home. This week, why not blame tuition fees on Mark Zuckerberg, or QAnon on plastic straws, or plastic straws on QAnon, or the fuel crisis on the patriarchy, or earthquakes on immigrants? The point is not whether any of this makes sense. The point is a hot take so blistering it attracts millions of rage clicks for the entirety of a news cycle, or 17 minutes, whichever is shorter. Unfortunately, this weekend, journalists were busy playing Pin the Blame on the Tragedy, and it was mightily unfortunate because of the poignancy of the tragedy. On Friday, much-loved Member of Parliament Sir David Amess was stabbed to death during his constituency surgery. One man has been arrested for the crime. Ali Harbi Ali, a man known to counter-terrorist services, had booked an appointment with David Amess and, after the stabbing, stayed around to be arrested, which he quickly was under Section 41 of the Terrorism Act. When family and friends grieve and colleagues have been reeling at the vicious attack, the UK's commentariat got to work to play Pin the Blame on the tragedy. But they did so with one arm tied behind their back, because the obvious blame card, Islamic terrorism, is a card that is apparently out of bounds. So like crazed Basil Fawlties desperately telling themselves, "Don't mention the jihadis!" they have spent the weekend pinning the blame on pretty much anything else. Some have wanted to blame the government, with one ex-police chief tweeting, "This is what happens when you have a government that sows hate." The government itself has offered several lessons to be learnt. Among Priti Patel's responses was the suggestion that we might end online anonymity, as though the tragedy were some nasty tweets as opposed to an actual stabbing. Labour MP Jess Phillips was on the BBC this morning lamenting our inhumanity to politicians. She said David Amess's death shows that MPs aren't always seen as human beings. As has been pointed out relentlessly on Twitter today, this was the same Jess Phillips who said she would, and I quote, "stab Jeremy Corbyn in the front, not the back." Many of those were anonymous accounts, though, so perhaps they should look out. But why? Why do we seek to find a definitive cause for these tragedies? And why is the cause we fix on something we already believe anyway? If you ask me, it's because human beings hate to be out of control. And when tragedy strikes, we feel like we can tame the chaos if we have a theory, an explanatory cause. And so we pile our blame and our insecurities and our hatred onto this convenient scapegoat. Last month, Labour MP Angela Rayner went viral with a speech about Tory scum. Apparently Tory scum are to blame for the woes of Britain. Now there are people saying it was Angela's speech that is to blame for David Amess's death. And if not Angela's speech, then the coarsening of political discourse in general. Now all these things are problems, but none of them are the reason for this tragedy, which we have just witnessed. All the blame games that we're playing are just a riding of hobby horses we have already ridden. But we ride the hobby horses and we apportion the blame because all of us are scared witless by life's ultimate tragedy, death. But perhaps David Amess himself points to an answer. He was a politician known for his vocal faith. At the center of that faith is a tragedy, the death of Christ. And though we might seek to pin the blame on other people, the blame for that tragedy boomerangs back to us. We are the problem. I am the problem. And I can't shift the blame to anyone else. But amazingly, Christ rose again to forgive me and lift me out of the blame game. More than that, he lifts me eventually out of the tragedy of death altogether. And in that light, I can face life and death, tragedy and blame with the hope of Christ. So David Amess, rest in peace and rise in glory. And may that be the hope that guides us all. It's October the 18th. I'm Glen Scrivener, and this is The Speakeasy. welcome to the Speakeasy. My name is Glen Scrivener. So glad to have your company, and it's great to have with me Nate Morgan-Locke. Hello, Nate.
Happy Monday, Glenn.
Happy Monday.
It's great to be here in the Speakeasy once again.
Isn't it? And we've also got Claude Avilés in the top chat, who on YouTube has just commented, UK is woke and PC, and yet both Nate and I have Macs. So not sure if that's quite the case. But lovely to have you, Claude, and do be answering questions in the top chat if you're here on YouTube. We're talking about inappropriate blame being levelled at people for certain tragedies. As the monologue discussed.
Yeah. It was interesting. This was the first time I'd ever heard of Sir David
Amess.
And it was strange because not knowing who someone was and him not being sort of like this big celebrity, national climbing politician.
Yeah.
I was actually quite refreshed to hear the story about who he was. To hear that this was a genuinely concerned representative of his people. I just found that incredibly uplifting because obviously you hear so much which is, about terrible politicians doing terrible things and scandal in public life and all that sort of stuff. And then it seemed like, and by all accounts, everything that's been sort of posted about him in terms of personal engagements with him has been really, really positive.
Really, yeah.
One of my favorite ones was actually there was a photograph that someone had put up of him, I think very soon after he'd been knighted.
I'm just downloading it now.
Yeah. And can we pull that up at all? It's a picture of him.
Do you have it?
In a...
I've just...
I don't have it.
Here we go.
Someone must be able to find it. But it's a picture of him in a forest.
There we go.
Yeah. And he's dressed as a knight, wearing this kind of glorious, rampant lion armor.
Is that his own standard? Who knows?
And with
he probably has a standard. But look how gleeful he is.
Yeah.
It's like he knows how to have fun, doesn't he? Like he knows how to not take himself too seriously.
And I mean, and that was one of the things that people were saying was that there were these examples of him. He was always taking decoration very seriously. So at Christmas, he would always insist that they do a big thing in his office at Westminster. And some year there was a massive inflatable Santa Claus that broke free from its moorings and floated off across Westminster. And obviously when someone dies in very surprising and sort of sudden circumstances, you do tend to want to remember the incredible things about them. But it's been interesting that even though he holds views which many people in a kind of progressive society might disagree with, so he's very, very pro-life. Which, of course, I think is awesome. It's like brilliant. There's someone who's really, really pro-life. And the fact that I haven't heard of him is a shame. But, yes, the personal encounters people have had with him are so positive. And that, in one sense it's both sad to discover, obviously the awful loss of life, but I found it in a way refreshing that there was this guy in politics. Right.
And when you think that everyone is like Disraeli, climbing up the greasy pole, and that's what a politician is like, it does make you think, well, how many other constituency MPs are there? There's, 650 in the House of Commons? I could probably name 12, like maybe 15, I don't know.
Yeah.
And
they're all terrible, right?
Yeah,
pretty much.
Well, that's what you know them for, and they want to be in the top 12.
Yeah.
Whereas David Amess did not seem to want to be in the top 12, and he took that title of minister very seriously.
Yeah.
It's a fascinating leftover of our Christian heritage that those who rule us are called servants. The Old English for servant is minister. And, it's stunning that when you think about the Roman Empire, their great rulers were known as gods. Yeah. Caesar was a god. Julius Caesar was a god. And Augustus Caesar was son of God because he was son of Julius. And the things that made them godlike were the slaughters, and how many people they'd enslaved. And to think 2,000 years later, we don't call our rulers gods, we call them servants. Yeah. And David Amess seemed like he lived up to the title.
And in a way, one of the things that's so interesting. So we were talking earlier on about the way in which, if someone dies in very sort of scandalous or surprising or rare circumstances, how does the way in which they die relate to the life that they lived, right? So you could live a totally ordinary life and be killed by a drunk driver or something, and people might say, well, that had nothing to do with the kind of life that this person lived, and yet through this sort of act, their life's been taken away. What I found fascinating about his death was that obviously he died whilst doing his constituency surgery, being visited by the concerned people of Southend, or so obviously he thought, and that's what he was there to do. Now, what's interesting is that the guy who's obviously the prime suspect, I don't know how you really call it a suspect when he sort of remained there on the scene.
After the stabbing, he wanted to be arrested.
Harby Abbey.
Yeah.
Ali. This guy's from Kentish Town in North London, so he's not actually from David Amess's constituency at all. And apparently, because of his desire was to just cause havoc, cause terror, it could have been anyone, any MP. He was just trying to get seen by an MP so that he could get close enough to them to perform this outrageous murder. And what an interesting thing that David Amess's approach is to represent his people. Is known as someone who was constantly holding the concerns of Southend before Parliament, right? Yes. I'm going to carry my people into the place of power. And that means that he was accessible. Yes. He was the guy you could go and see, because that's vulnerability. That's one of the things.
And he invited his betrayer in. So this guy just booked an appointment, and at midday you will be seen by David Amess. And, so you don't want to overplay the Christ significances along the way, but perhaps the fact that the story is resonating with us so much is, I heard it described that, the Western civilization resonates with the Christ frequency, and all it takes is a tuning fork to set it off, and suddenly, something kind of hums. And when this story sort of hits us, it hums with such a significance. He invites his betrayer in. This servant, who is also a ruler, who stands up for, first he stood up for Basildon. That was his first sort of constituency until 92, I think. Okay. Or was it 97? Until 97, 83 to 97, and then he went to Southend-on-Sea. And they used to sort of play bingo with his sort of Westminster speeches. How long until he mentions Basildon? How long until he mentions
Which is fascinating, isn't it? Because why wouldn't you be playing that with everyone who was a constituency MP sent by their constituency to represent them before in the corridors of power?
Yes, the fact that that's notable might not reflect well on every other one.
But again, to think, if you talk about, this is our democratic system and it strikes to the very heart of our democracy, and you think, yes, absolutely it does. And people would probably say, well, we go back to the ancient Greeks for our understanding of democracy.
Right.
But this idea of our representative, our man who carries our concerns into the place of power, there's actually a strong priestly idea that you send your man with, and as the high priest wears the stones of the 12 tribes of Israel over his heart and on his shoulders. Right. As he goes through the tabernacle, he's now taking his people with him. And the guy who's known, he's going to mention Basildon again. Well, obviously, because he's interceding for his people.
But Aaron is going to mention Dan and Naphtali again. Dan. Always going on about Dan. Right? But those were places as well as tribes, as well as the people. And so the high priest is always meant to carry the local concerns into the heart of power. And actually our parliamentary democracy has come from that. So, who was it who first used the phrase in English, rule of the people, by the people, and for the people? Here's a question for you. And for those at home,
I feel like this is... good question. I'm going to say, I think it must be Abraham Lincoln.
Yeah, well, good guess. Good guess.
Does Abraham Lincoln do it at the Gettysburg Address.
He might well do. He certainly picks up. He certainly uses that language. He's not the first.
Okay,
he's not the first to use that language. So there he is in the 19th century using that language. But who first used it in the 14th century? John Wycliffe, in the preface to his New Testament translation, and after a meditation on the priesthood of Christ. He makes this incredibly political, comment. So, I mean, there are reasons why John Wycliffe was persona non grata, and one of them was political.
Horace said that before John Wycliffe. If you don't get that joke, you should watch Lutheran Satire's video, Horace Reads the Answer. Or is it Horace Ruins Christmas? Both brilliant videos.
Horace Ruins Christmas.
But Horace's determination to be the primary.
I love that Nate's jokes require footnotes. And then,
Well, this is YouTube. You're supposed to jump around, right? Surely.
My jokes are more like end notes. So, like, at the end of the show, we'll say, and at 3 minutes 47, the reason why that was funny is, and I'll explain it, but this idea of you carry the locality to the seat of power is precisely the reason why we have a Westminster system of government, in which, the secular rulers were sort of trickling down from the papal revolutions of the 11th, 12th century in medieval Christendom, and parliaments are taken from this idea that whoever represents or whoever rules over you needs to represent you and needs to have the closest possible proximity to you, and because Christ, it's stunning to think that the one who rules over heaven and earth is one who took Nazareth as his hometown. Like, people might make jokes about Southend-on-Sea. I'm not sure. We might have a friend coming and talking to us on the speakeasy later who knew David Amess. He's currently in a church meeting right now, but he might be able to spend time with us in a second. But we can ask him whether people make jokes of Southend-on-Sea.
I mean, we live in Eastbourne, so people
we're not
make
casting
jokes
stones
about Eastbourne.
We're not casting stones, but Nazareth was certainly a town about which they made jokes, and yet it's fascinating in the Book of Acts how often Jesus is described as Jesus of Nazareth, Jesus of Nazareth, this nowhere town like that was derided. Christ owns that place, and even post-resurrection and post-ascension, he is known as Jesus of Nazareth. And so I think it's an even extra layer of beautiful kind of Christ significance that they've now said, Southend-on-Sea, we'll make it a city.
That does seem like such a... Because that was one of his concerns. He was trying... There was a make your town a city sort of... I don't know, was it a competition or something?
I don't know.
But, and he was, was lobbying and working very hard to kind of get that for Southend. And so it does seem an incredibly fitting thing to give this place that he was effectively representing. That significance, which is great.
So what else to say about David Amess? Sir David Amess. Why was he knighted? I don't know.
I don't know. Can we find that out?
Find that out.
We have a team of wonderful people.
Yes.
Who are...
Our interns are beavering away on the tech deck.
But I want to know, when did David Amess become Sir David Amess?
Yes, so that he could ride that horse and be so thrilled to bits about it. I mean, just stunning. Let's have a look again. I mean, the grin is just, he's having the time of his life, isn't he?
That's good.
So just an utter tragedy, really, to see this man, this kind man, this servant, doing what he loves to do in the midst of doing that, inviting in the very one who would betray him and getting killed in that. So, I mean, no wonder it's sending shockwaves. But it's not the first time that this kind of tragedy has befallen ministers of parliament. There was Joe Cox in 2016, just before the Brexit vote, I remember, sort of June time, I think. And there was the stabbing of a police officer on Westminster Bridge who was guarding the palaces of Westminster just 4 years ago, I guess that was. And so we live with this thing about terrorism, but it's interesting that is not the conversation at the moment.
No, because that's not one of the the blame cards. Have you still got your blame?
Here we go. Yeah,
blame
I've got plenty of
cards?
blame to go around.
Okay,
There's plenty of blame to
going
go around.
everywhere.
If anyone wants one.
Yeah, and you've got to have something to blame. You've got to put the blame somewhere, and you particularly have to put the blame somewhere when you have a sort of closed system, right? If you don't have, categories for theology, then of course politics will rise to prominence and become absolute. And when the politics have sort of suggested that Islamic terrorism was, well, that was something that was really early 21st century, but now we're sort of talking about something else.
Yeah.
And what we're talking about seems to be toxic political debate. What are the other examples of
social media.
Yeah.
It's about, we need to get rid of anonymous Twitter accounts, as though this had anything to do with any kind of social media website.
Yeah.
So,
what is bizarre, and maybe we'll get into this later on, but it takes the agency out of the hands of the person committing the crime.
yes.
Because even if they tell you, oh, the reason I'm doing this is X, people say, no, you think that, but actually it's Y. There's something else going on here.
Right.
And you don't even know why you're acting in the way that you're acting.
Yeah.
And not only are we not really listening or paying attention to the reasons being given by the person perpetrating the crime, we're also jumping in as quickly as possible, as you mentioned in the monologue, with our own, oh, well, this is obviously what this is about. This is clearly. So I think it was Steve Chalk who tweeted, as he head of the Oasis Trust or something like that. And he tweeted, where this man may have been involved in fundamentalist Islam or Islamic terrorism. He may have been involved in that, but he was definitely suffering a mental health crisis. And this goes to show why we should really make sure that we properly fund children and young people's mental health care and provision.
Which has been his concern anyway for the last 40 years.
And you think, well, how do you, you could say, right, by default, someone who goes and stabs someone to death that they've never met before must have a mental health issue. But in a way, you sort of think, well, clearly your category for what mental health is not based upon any kind of assessment of a person, but based upon a series of acts which must necessitate some kind of mental health issue, which could be remedied, relieved, and solved with an increase in funding into mental health provision. Now, it might be absolutely true that we need to provide more money for mental health, but it might be also nothing to do with what this man, Harbi Ali, was doing. So it's the sort of nonsense of saying, oh, I don't need to actually listen to what was going on. This just clicks a switch in my brain to go, this is the problem here. This is where the blame lies.
Which means we never learn anything. We use events as pretexts for riding the hobby horses we were already riding, and we'll be riding long after we've forgotten this instant. And that is the great tragedy of this. And so we've decided that we will come up with a game.
Yes, as we like to do on the Speakeasy. We want to have a game this week. Last week, we looked at we heard some sort of stories, personal testimonies of either people coming to faith or coming out, and we had to guess which one was which based upon the language, because we recognized they sounded very similar. So I think we have Jack over there on the tech deck.
Hello, Jack on the tech
give
deck.
us some questions.
And guys in the live chat, do feel free to play the game. Jack, explain the rules to us.
Sure, no problem, guys. Thanks. So if you're ready to play the blame game, the rules are: it's basically a simple multiple choice quiz. I will read out to you the name of a specific tragedy, specific tragic event, and the year that it took place in.
Okay.
And then I will list for you 3 potential excuses that were made for why this was such a tragedy, and you will have to try and guess which one was actually said by an actual politician. And
Okay.
once
So
you
the speaker in each case is a politician?
it's all politicians, and I'm afraid,
Okay.
based on the website I got these from, I'm pretty sure they're all American as well.
Okay.
But,
Okay.
yeah, so they'll be quite localized to there, but nonetheless, I think it should be quite an interesting experience to learn what sort of things were said. And after you've guessed, I will reveal to you who said it and the full context of the quote.
Okay.
Go.
Okay, so the first event was Hurricane Maria in 2017. Did the politician in question blame this event on A, massive debt, B, a breach of protocol, or C, not enough help from other countries?
Debt, a breach of protocol,
Or
Sounds-
lack of help.
or lack of help from other countries. I'm going to reveal my ignorance and say, was Hurricane Maria, was that in the States?
Well, I'm
I'm probably not
I don't
allowed to
think
go.
I heard about it.
Yeah. And you were in the States in 2017.
I was in 2017. So,
Yeah.
I mean, we know who was president in 2017. Donald J. Trump.
Why isn't he the answer is D,
The answer
Donald
must be
Trump.
Donald Trump. Or maybe this is one of the things he said. So, right, I'm going to go with
Right.
a lack of help from other countries.
Okay.
Because even if it's not in America, I'm going to say that was what it was.
Okay.
That was, someone said, oh, if America had helped.
Nobody.
Yeah.
Right.
Do you know what I mean?
Oh, right.
Like it could have been
because
like a
it was
Democrat
divine
who was-
retribution because
was
they
tr-
weren't
Yeah.
helping other countries.
I know. So, but I'm going to go with the lack of help, which was C.
Okay, Jackie,
Right.
you're with Jackie Knowles, who says C. Tracy H. and Greg
Jackie,
Doles are both going for B. What was B? Remind me of B.
A breach of protocol.
Breach of protocol. I think Tracy and Greg are recognizing that this is not the kind of answer you would make up if it was not.
Protocol.
Nick Whitaker says, oh, it has to be budget.
Oh, okay.
Ah. Yeah.
Right. Well, so what are you going with? You'll go B.
I'm going to go B.
I'm going C.
Breach of protocol. What is the answer?
Well, the answer is actually A, massive debt.
Massive debt.
Yeah, Nick was right.
Nick was right. Whatever the money one was. Follow the money, says Nick.
Yes, President Donald Trump at the time said, Puerto Rico, which was already suffering from broken infrastructure and massive debt, is in deep trouble in the wake of Hurricane Maria and the consequences of it.
Okay. So Trump was involved. So
Yes, and it was
Yeah.
Trump's blame
Yes.
was Puerto Rico doesn't have enough money. I don't.
Oh right, yeah, infrastructure
Yeah.
to withstand the hurricane. Was that his point? I'm seeking
It wouldn't
to
have been as
strengthen his
bad
point,
if they were richer. I don't know. Is that the point? I mean, it's,
sometimes those things are said about earthquakes. It's like, well, I
Okay.
mean, like the earthquake in like Haiti in Port-au-Prince, was of lesser magnitude than ones that sort of rock Christchurch on a much more regular
Okay,
basis.
okay.
But so there is a poverty
Because-
problem
yeah,
there
yeah.
because there isn't the infrastructure to pay for things. So I've just bailed Donald Trump out,
Well,
which
we
is a
bailed him
first.
out and we
There's
both got
first.
it wrong. So we're on 0 points.
Tracy H says, "Great job."
All
Okay.
right, let's go.
Okay,
with
question
the
2.
Second one.
Okay, this one was about a shooting in Columbine High School. Did the politician in question in this case blame it on A, violent video games, B, poor education, or C, depression and mental health?
Columbine in the 90s.
What was it? 96 or something?
1999.
Oh, 99. 99.
99.
Late. That's later than I thought.
I know. So it's the Matrix, and it's the
Computer games.
games.
It's always computer games.
Because it was like a sort of Marilyn Manson, and
Yeah.
it's the pop culture that's so
Yeah.
bereft of
Yeah.
it's nihilistic, and so that's why these
Yeah.
kids. Are
Wendy Lomont is all over this video games. She said on
Yes,
Twitter earlier.
everyone's- Also, the Matrix was
Also,
blamed.
The Matrix
yes,
was blamed.
Wendy, that's correct.
Ha.
So I think we've nailed that one.
Everyone's going A. Greg
Have we?
Doles, Tracy H. Well, we're all wrong.
Yeah, we could all be wrong.
What's the answer, Jack?
The answer was indeed violent video games.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, Alabama Senator Jeff Sessions said about the Columbine High School mass shooting, they are able to hook up to the internet and play video games that are extraordinarily violent.
Okay.
But that was that feels like such a period of time where that was a thing, when
Yes,
there was
yeah.
a sort of it was the blaming the ills of society on particular forms of pop culture, which was like which was a genuine thing.
Before we had Twitter to blame.
Before we could blame social media, we could just blame video games and films.
Yeah.
But I feel like they did they talk about that in the letters? The killers wrote letters or something, in which they referenced stuff. I don't know.
Yeah.
Should probably just stop talking about this one. But anyway, thank you for that.
That's question number 2. Question number 3.
3.
Okay, so question number 3. The Las Vegas shooting, 2017. Did the politician in question say that the problem with this whole thing was A, the wrong president was in office, B, terrorism was the fault of this, or C, there were not enough guns at the scene of the crime?
Oh, I think it'll be not enough guns.
Yes.
Which is ridiculous when you actually look at the situation in that, because obviously it was one guy who'd holed up in a hotel room with a whole bunch of automatic weapons and obviously just shot but people at a festival like they were
like it was a computer game. Yeah.
But yes, people. I mean, yeah, I think the not enough guns thing. The good guy with the gun takes out the bad guy with the gun. That is an American kind of
saying
perspective on it, which
Yep.
I mean, it's been proven true in lots of cases where
Yeah.
people have been taken out by, a carrying citizen. But in that one, I think, maybe a bit of a stretch.
I think the answer, the wrong president was in office, is so silly that it might be true.
Okay.
In that I could make up those other two, like false answers, but I don't think I'd even think
To
say the wrong president, like in that point. So I'm going to say the wrong president.
Okay.
But you're going to say guns.
I'm going with the. So Jackie and I get on so well. We always pick the same one. Greg and Tracy are with you.
Okay. Who's right, Jack?
Well, I'd just like to thank you, Glenn, for indirectly praising my creativity, because the correct answer was C, not enough guns.
So no one could come up with what Jack
came up with. It was brilliant.
His mind.
Yeah.
Brilliant mind. Have we got one more? Is there one more?
Yeah, no, there's one more if you
Let's
want
do
to do one more.
I think people are enjoying this. They're all
Totally.
jumping in.
Yeah.
Right.
Sure. Okay. Well, number 5, the event was Hurricane Katrina back in 2005.
Oh, yeah.
So, did the politician blame this on A, social media, B, lazy allocation of tax money, or C, it wasn't a tragedy in the first place?
Oh. It wasn't A.
Now I'm thinking, could Jack have come up with that? the darkest timeline in which Jack thinks someone could think, because I think that's
thinking, Jack?
I think it's got to be the middle one, hasn't it?
A tragedy.
The tax money.
Yes, I mean there was a debate, wasn't it, about the levy? The levy wasn't sufficiently strong, and wasn't there a debate
Just
about
try
that?
not to sing American Pie. Yeah. Yes, I mean the thing I remember about that. So obviously it's not social media 2005, because most of the social media channels weren't around. I think YouTube had just been invented that year. But,
and it has a tangential relationship to hurricanes. Just saying. We can't pin acts of God on
all these people watching Charlie Bit My Finger. That's what's causing hurricanes. But no, the issue, the real sort of political mileage in that was how
Kanye?
soon George Bush visited.
Yeah, it was too late.
He didn't visit in time or something. But I'll go for
and then Kanye on the telethon next to Mike Myers. Have you seen this YouTube clip? We should get it for later. But they're raising money for Katrina survivors, and there's a piece with Mike Myers and Kanye West. And like Kanye goes off script. I mean off script.
Oh, okay.
And he's like, because George W. Bush does not care about black people.
Oh,
and
I see.
And and Wayne's World is just there, like, unsure what to do. Cut to an ad break.
So, but this is politicians, not Kanye West.
Yeah,
We're
yeah.
not looking at Kanye's.
Well, Kanye 2024. Who knows? So I'm going to say it's improper allocation of taxation money.
I think you're right. I think that was B.
Yeah.
That was B. I'll just tell you what the full quote was and the full context of it. The answer may have been a little misleading, but basically Representative Richard Baker said, "We finally cleaned up New Orleans public housing. We couldn't do it, but God did." That was his comment on the Hurricane Katrina.
So it wasn't a tragedy?
In his eyes, basically, yeah. I mean, he backtracked on that a bit later, but it did little to...
He walked it back, as they say.
Whew.
Yeah.
Well, thank you very much, Jack.
Wow. That was a tricky one, but yeah, thank
Giving
you.
us
Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you. No,
the blame game.
it was good fun.
we love playing the blame
game. We should have a jingle for the blame game. We should do it every week. Or pin the blame on the tragedy.
Plenty of blame to go around.
So let's just have a think about what it is that makes people... Why do we go in with this preconceived idea to say, I'll tell you why that's wrong. Or I tell you what's to blame for that. It's this. Why do we do that?
Well, for one thing, we hate being out of control, and a tragedy that strikes senselessly is abhorrent to our sense of reality, and that would make us face the fact that we live on a terrifying planet where literally anything could kill you at any moment, and you are not God, and you are helplessly out of control. And tragedies like what happened to David Amess at midday on Friday could happen to you at midday tomorrow, and you're not in charge. Okay, I'm not going to live in that world. There must be reasons. Yeah. And I need to have access to those. I can't entrust those reasons to somebody else, aka God. I've got to know what those reasons are, because that will help me get a handle on my life and sort of place me in a world that is not so abjectly terrifying. So I think there's that control aspect to it. And then there's the sort of the self-justification aspect to it, that I've been riding this hobby horse for quite some time. And G.K. Chesterton's got this funny line about most people aren't content when their theory is proved by data. Most people are only content when their theory proves all the data. And so we're all walking around with our little tiny little thumbnail sketches of the world that prove everything. And anything that comes up on my Twitter feed, I know what that is. That's climate change, or whatever.
There's a couple of nice sort of illustrations I've heard people use on these things, which is what's the phrase? What my net can't catch ain't fish.
Yeah.
And so you think, oh, that's an interesting sort of thing.
Yeah.
And I think this might have been from Cornelius van Til, who was a Dutch sort of apologist in the 20th century, and taught presuppositional apologetics, which I don't know that much about, despite having been to where I went to school. But he was saying that once people have discounted the idea of God, they're effectively like a drunk man trying to find his car keys in the light of the street lamp.
Yes.
And the keys must be in the light of the street lamp, because that's the only illuminated place.
Right.
So unless they're in here, they have ceased to exist, because there can't be anything outside of this. Yeah. And I think so much of what we've seen over the weekend with this, the tragedy for Sir David Amess is people just saying, no, I only have political illumination.
Yes.
And so my only understanding of this must be down to what party politics has been doing.
Yeah. And that's partly down to, because the obvious blame card is, what the killer actually came with. Yeah. Like, he came with his calling card. He's like, hello. And he's been detained under the Terrorism Act. So, what's a terrorist got to do to get taken seriously these days? But we don't want to go there. So we don't. So we've kind of. So that's the darkness that we're not going to look into. Yeah. And there are other darknesses that we never look into, which is like things like me. I might be part of the problem.
Yep.
We will never do that. And so we need a problem that's just sufficiently outside the family home.
Yeah. It's got to be someone else. And we won't do the thing which says maybe there is something about Western society which doesn't have to be the patriarchy and capitalism, right? It doesn't have to be these big kind of, bully boys of the left. It just needs to be a lack of social cohesion, which has multiple different reasons, but seems to produce all sorts of implications in terms of the way that people think about themselves, about their neighbor, about the world that they live in, and which, at root has just sin, underneath it, and in all its multifaceted elements.
Yeah.
And one of the other things this made me think of was when there's a couple of occasions in the Gospels where people will point to someone in an unfortunate situation, whether it's the man born blind in John 9, or you've got the Tower of Siloam which falls and kills people, or those whose blood were mixed with sacrifices.
Yeah.
And almost in all those situations, Jesus says, I wouldn't worry too much about putting the blame on the people who suffered.
Yeah.
And actually think, like you were saying earlier, about how this relates to your precarious, vulnerable position in the world. This is a time for personal reflection rather than for pointing the fingers and saying, oh, they got what was coming to them, or this is because of some other terrible people over there.
Right. Which is, the Cornelius Van Til example is precisely that the man is looking outside his house, out in the street, because that's the comfortable place to find an issue, and it's very uncomfortable to find something closer to home. And like I apply this to the. In the last 12 months, things about Ravi Zacharias, came to light within the Christian church. And where did we want to find fault? Where did we want to put the blame? And, one very prominent evangelist came out with a blog post about a year ago when people were starting to take this stuff seriously. And people didn't really take this stuff seriously until kind of February of 2021. But one particular evangelist wrote this blog post saying, I know what the problem with Ravi Zacharias was. He was into intellectual apologetics.
Right.
And he was always a little bit too clever for himself, was this Ravi Zacharias. And I'd always noticed this about him. Now, this actual evangelist kind of endorsed every Ravi Zacharias book that was ever going, and spoke uniquely and universally in glowing terms about Ravi Zacharias. And so, suddenly after the death and after the scandal, he comes out and saying, I always knew what the problem was with Ravi Zacharias. It was his intellectual apologetics. And you think, 1 minute he was giving the Kalam cosmological argument, and the next minute he was trafficking women for sex. It's an easy mistake to make. It's a hop, skip, and a jump. And just like, no, this was the hobby horse you were riding 20 years. You've been riding this hobby horse for years. And now this tragedy hits, and you want to fit it into a narrative that you've already had, which has nothing to do, really, with why he was trafficking women for sex and doing all sorts of financial, sexual, and spiritual abuse on people. But part of the reason is, okay, we want to fit it into a narrative, as Greg Dole says. Everyone has a narrative they're looking to validate. And everyone has vulnerabilities and sins that they want to protect and keep eyes away from. And it's much more comfortable to talk about intellectual apologetics than it is to talk about our own vulnerabilities to sex and abuse and complacency and the bystander effect and complicity with evil and structures that allowed and enabled the abuse. Much easier to talk about. I was never a fan of intellectual apologetics.
And that idea of you mentioned this in a different context. I think on Friday when the Friday's Unlocked, and you were talking about Procrustes.
Oh yes,
that's how you pronounce his name. The Procrustean bed, which is a fascinating part of the myth of Theseus. So I was doing some reformed mythologist work on this.
Take us through the myth, reformed mythologist.
But so Theseus is going to go off. He's on this great adventure towards Athens, and he meets a series of terrible people on the way, right? And they're all kind of notoriously wicked, and they all have their own special, contrived way of slaughtering travelers. Like they do this all these different ways. And so Procrustes is this guy who basically has an inn. He's an innkeeper, and he has this bed. And he says, one size fits all, right? That's the great thing about my bed, is no matter who you are, whatever traveler, this bed, ladies and gentlemen, come on, Theseus.
It's the number one thing I look for in
You
a hotel.
can. That's it. I want a bed that's going to perfectly fit me.
Is this identical? Is this 5'10"?
So-
Because if it's 5'11",
Yeah.
I'm not interested.
I only want a precise bed. And he says, everyone will fit on my on this bed. And the way that Procrustes gets everyone to fit on the bed is, if you're too short, he it becomes a rack, and you are stretched out till you pop, and you finally fit on the size of the bed. And if you're too long, we cut enough bits off of you so that you fit into the bed. And in some ways, that's what's happening with this, these pin the blame on the tragedy.
Yeah.
Is we're saying, I've got my Procrustean bed.
Got an idea.
Already decided the way the world is.
Yeah.
I know the way the world is.
Yeah.
And see everything fits. Yeah. But of course, you just end up ignoring the way the world is and insisting on having your own very warped view of the world. Yeah. Now, just to continue the Theseus story before he then goes to Athens and gets off to do the Minotaur thing, he always flips the script on these. He doesn't turn the tables; he turns the bed on Procrustes and then kills Procrustes on that bed. Mm-hmm. And so Theseus wins in the end. So
yes, yeah.
That's just a very sort of quick version.
And the redemption of it for us, I guess, is that the tragedy at the heart of the Christian story is the death of God, and who is to blame. And you can play the blame game all you like, and you can point the finger, and lots of people do. But at the end of the day, those three fingers are pointing back at you. Yeah. And the blame for the death of God is me, because I do insist that this world revolves around me and my silly little conception of reality. And when God shows up, I put him on the Procrustean bed. Yeah. And I say, this is not the God I was bargaining for, and so we chop him to pieces. Yeah. And we literally did that. But the flipping of the script in the Christian sense is, he rises up again to offer us peace. Yeah. And to invite us, not onto a rack, but to his table, where we belong, all sorts, all shapes and sizes, on the basis of repentance, and repentance is a beautiful word, isn't it? It's think again. Yeah, yeah. You thought God was the problem, you're the solution. Think again, pal. Yeah. God's the solution, you're the problem. Yeah. But on that basis, you come and you're welcome. And I think, so there's a brilliant welcome, and there's a brilliant escape from the blame game, as well. Because now I'm welcome at the same table as all the others, but only on the basis that I'm a selfish so-and-so too, and I'm now repentant by grace. And instead of doling out the blame, now it's sort of doling out the invitations. Come to the table and join the party. Yeah. I reckon.
No, I think the flipping of the switch, the flipping of the script, the turning of the tables, these are all good. Just on that, just another example of the, what my net can't catch ain't fish. I don't know if anyone else will remember this advert. It was an advert for a lager called Harp Lager, which I think is Irish. Is that right?
It's brewed by the Guinness guys, isn't
Irish lager called Harp. Yeah. And the advert was brilliant because there was a barber shop, and the man goes into the barber shop, and he sits down, and he says what he'd like, and then the barber says, "Oh, well, you could have a Lionel Blair." Now, we should footnote this as well. Lionel Blair was a light entertainer in the probably decades. But he said, "You could have a Lionel Blair cut like mine." And then the guy in the chair says, "But Lionel Blair doesn't have his hair cut like yours." And then the barber says, "He does if he comes in here." And I've loved that joke for the whole, for, I don't know, 20 years I've enjoyed, 25 years I've loved the phrase, "Lionel Blair doesn't have his hair cut like yours. He does if he comes in here." It's just, and that's the way, that I think is the best example. Forget Procrustes in his bed. Yeah. Forget Cornelius Van Til. Harp lager. Time for a sharp harp. If anyone has ever seen the advert, or if literally it came to me in a dream, I would like to know. Maybe we can find it on YouTube, but it's it's what happens.
So, rest in peace, David Amess, and rise in glory, a man of faith.
Yeah.
Catholic who stood proud for his pro-life beliefs, and it's been very interesting hearing the tributes to David Amess and how full of faith he was, and how no one can kind of speak about his life without speaking about his faith. Yeah. Which is interesting because I went online to try and find, are there some quotes that he has about theology, like what he's and I guess his legacy has been the fact that he has stood for things like pro-life issues on the basis of his Catholic faith, and saying, "I was born a Catholic, I'll die a Catholic. This is right at the core of who I am." And I guess that integrity has spoken such volumes, really.
We obviously hope that genuine investigation is done, genuine, rethinking is done. I mean, it would be a wonderful thing if his death did bring about a change in attitudes within the political discourse, because the political discourse is toxic and it's horrible, and people are mean to each other on Twitter, and etc., etc., and there are problems with mental health. And of course, it would be wonderful if the legacy of the tragedy was positivity and positive moves, as the South End becoming a city seems to be. That would be a great legacy. But we want to be people who are looking at the world and genuinely investigating what's going on in it, and not coming with our preconceived notions and jumping in with a hot take. Yeah. When there's absolutely no need to do so.
Yeah. Yep. I agree. Well, guys, thank you so much for joining us for the Speakeasy tonight. We've got some great content coming for you very soon. I've done an interview with Dan Strange, who is the author of the book Making Faith Magnetic, and we've got some wonderful things to talk about, how our conversations with our non-Christian friends and family can be conversations that really honor the way that God is up to work in all of our friends' lives. And he's a really stimulating thinker, Dan Strange, so stay tuned for that. I'm also talking to Sam Albury very soon. So Sam was last on our channel as we spoke about Ravi Zacharias and his position within Ravi Zacharias International Ministries, and now he's left there. And we've been thinking about the UK constituency as well as the US, and we'll be really revisiting some of those issues and what is church culture like on both sides of the Atlantic now in the aftermath of not only the Ravi Zacharias scandals, but also Jonathan Fletcher and John Smythe and many other things. So Wayne Lawther says, thank you, guys. Thank you, Wayne. Wendy Lomont. Good discussion with a thumb up. Thumb up to you, Wendy. Great. Thought it was my computer, Jackie Knowles says. Oh, yeah. People are asking whether the volume could be turned up. Who knows? I don't know. StreamYard, hey? StreamYard. It's too hot or too cold. We just can't get it just right. Next week.
Goldilocks week.
It'll be just right.
That's what we always say. Just if people have been appreciating this content, we thank you that you're enjoying it. How can you sort of help us to make more of it? How can you help to keep Speak Life creating resources to refresh and revive the church and to reach the world? How can they do that, Glenn?
You can go to speaklife.org.uk/give, and you'll find lots of ways of giving. And some people appreciate giving via Patreon. That's one way that's really simple to give on a monthly basis. Obviously, Patreon take a chunk, as does the Taxman. But if you're in the UK and you're a UK taxpayer, then also there are options of giving tax efficiently for those in the UK. And those who give on a monthly basis get access to our Discord server, where behind the paywall we get into conversations and chats, and we share prayer requests, and there is exclusive content.
Exclusive content.
Including some of the content from our Unlocked Friday sessions and from our intensives, where we come to Eastbourne and learn the craft and meet the team and catch the vision for creative evangelism. And just before we go, Nate, can you just enthuse us a little bit, just give us a little taster for our Christmas film? I mean, you don't want to give away too much.
I don't want to give away too much, but we're very excited about it. We're filming it a week on Friday. That's the 29th of October. And it's a little story about a dear lady and a challenge she has to try and overcome.
Yes.
I think that's all I'm going to say.
Yes.
It in some ways is a very little challenge for her. But I think it's going to be a very sweet story. We're breaking new ground.
Yes.
We might be working with animals. That's, I think, pretty much.
We have worked with children.
Yeah,
we will now work with animals.
Yeah.
Actually, we worked with children and animals when I did 4 Kinds of Christmas. We filmed in a barn.
Okay.
And there were animals, and there was a child, in the
So
manger.
we're not breaking new ground. Sorry, scrap that.
but
we're doing the old ground.
Trained.
The old tricky ground.
Going back over it and doing it right.
We're very excited about getting that. If you do want to join us and support us and get onto that Discord, then that'd be great. We can tell you more there, and you can help us to put out this video, which we hope will delight people this Christmas and encourage them to think about Christ in a fresh way.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm sure they will. It's a brilliant idea that Nate's had, and we're thrilled to be able to give it some legs. So, Nate, thank you very much for tonight.
Thank you.
And thank you to everyone in the chat, Wayne and Wendy and Jackie and Eloine and Claude and Greg and Tracy and Nick and Peter and lots of others.
And thank you to the tech team.
Thank you to the tech
Put
team.
yourself on the video.
On the tech
say
deck.
Goodbye. Thank you.
You can say goodbye. Awesome. And we'll see you again next week. Actually, we won't.
2 weeks.
We'll see you in 2 weeks' time. There will be a video going out next week, but it won't be live. We'll see you in 2 weeks on The Speakeasy. God bless.
Bye.